The rain poured without mercy that evening in Lagos. The sky was gray and heavy, the kind of rain that made the streets smell of dust, exhaust, and forgotten dreams. Beneath the faded bridge at Third Mainland, a young woman sat curled up on a thin mat, her torn shawl barely protecting her from the cold. Her name was Amira. Once, she had been the kind of girl who lit up every room she walked into, full of laughter, ambition, and hope. She had dreamt of owning her own fashion line, of seeing her name printed on tags and magazines. And she had dreamt of love, the kind that stayed, the kind that didn't hurt. But dreams have a way of fading when life decides to test you. Now, Amira's fingers trembled as she wrapped them around her swollen belly. Her clothes were soaked, her hair clung to her face, and her lips quivered as she whispered to the little life inside her. "Just hold on a little longer, my love," she murmured. "Mummy's here. We'll be fine." Her voice cracked, not from fear, but from exhaustion. For weeks, she had been wandering the streets, sleeping in unfinished buildings and begging for leftover food. Sometimes she wondered if God still saw her. She used to have everything, not wealth but peace. And for a time she even had love. Adrian Cole, the charming billionaire whose smile could melt glass and whose kindness once felt real, had loved her once. Or so she thought. He was the man who bought her flowers even when she said she didn't need them, who danced with her barefoot on marble floors, who whispered promises under the city lights. But that was before the world reminded her who she was. Just a simple girl from a modest background who didn't belong in a billionaire's story. One lie, one misunderstanding, and everything shattered. Adrian's trust broke like glass. His words that day still echoed in her mind. "I can't believe you'd betray me like this, Amira." She had tried to explain, to beg, to show him the truth. But pride had closed his heart. And when she discovered she was pregnant, it was already too late. Now, months later, she sat under a bridge, invisible to the world. The sound of the rain drowned out the noise in her head, the memories, the guilt, the what-ifs. Cars sped past above, their lights casting fleeting glows over the puddles below. Occasionally, someone walked by, but no one looked twice. She was just another forgotten woman in a city that moved too fast to care. Then, suddenly, the growl of a black Range Rover broke through the storm. The car slowed as it approached the bridge, its headlights cutting through the rain. Amira turned her face away, afraid of pity, afraid of recognition. The car stopped. The window rolled down. For a moment, silence, only the sound of rain on metal. Then a deep, familiar voice spoke, almost trembling. "Amira?" Her heart stopped. She knew that voice, even after all this time, she knew. Slowly, she turned her head, her eyes meeting his through the mist. Adrian Cole. He looked different, older, heavier in the eyes, dressed in an expensive suit that screamed success. But none of that mattered. All she saw was the man who had once been her everything, now staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. Her throat tightened. She wanted to hide, to run, but her body wouldn't move. He stepped out of the car, umbrella forgotten, rain soaking his shoulders. His voice cracked as he whispered again, "Amira, what happened to you?" She looked away, her tears mixing with the rain. "Please," she said softly, "just go." Adrian froze. For a moment, time stood still, the thunder, the rain, the heartbeat of the city all fading away. He realized then that the woman trembling beneath the bridge wasn't a stranger. She was the same Amira who once taught him what love meant, the same woman he had broken with his doubt. And as he stood there, watching her cradle her belly in the storm, something deep inside him shattered. The billionaire who had everything suddenly realized what he'd lost, and what he might never forgive himself for. Adrian stood there in the pouring rain, his designer shoes sinking into the muddy ground, his heart pounding so loud it drowned the thunder. For a man used to power, control, and boardroom silence, this moment shattered everything he thought he knew about strength. "Amira," he said again, his voice trembling. She turned away, her arms wrapped tightly around her belly, as if shielding her unborn child from the very world that had failed her. "Please," she whispered, "don't do this. Just go." but he couldn't move. He couldn't even blink. The woman standing before him was nothing like the Amira he remembered. The one who wore perfume that smelled like fresh hibiscus and laughed like sunshine. This Amira was thin, pale, broken. Her face carried quiet strength. Yes, but it also carried something else. Pain that words couldn't cover. "Who did this to you?" he asked, his voice low, heavy with disbelief. She looked up at him, eyes glassy from both rain and tears. "You did," she said softly. "When you stopped believing in me." Those 6 words hit him like lightning. He felt his chest tighten, breath leaving his lungs as memories rushed back. The night he accused her of betrayal, the look of horror on her face, the way she begged him to listen. He hadn't. He'd walked away like a coward, letting his pride speak louder than his heart. Now here she was, standing under a bridge, carrying a child that should have been safe, loved, and warm. Adrian swallowed hard, rain sliding down his face. I thought you left the country," he managed to say. Amira let out a weak laugh, the kind that wasn't really a laugh at all. "Leave? With what money? With whose help? You destroyed everything, Adrian. My name, my career, my life." Her words twisted inside him. Back then, when his business empire was under pressure and rumors swirled about a stolen design, someone had framed Amira, the woman he trusted most. And instead of protecting her, he had thrown her to the wolves. He'd told himself it was business. But deep down, he'd been terrified that the woman he loved had used him. So he walked away before she could hurt him first. Now, staring at her trembling figure in the rain, he realized how wrong he had been. "Come with me," he said quietly, stepping closer. "Please, you can't stay out here like this." Amira shook her head stubbornly. "I don't need your pity." "It's not pity," he said quickly. It's guilt. It's regret. He stopped, voice breaking. "It's love, Amira. I never stopped loving you." Her eyes flickered with something. Pain, disbelief, maybe even anger. She took a shaky breath. "Love isn't supposed to destroy, Adrian. You loved me, then you believed lies about me. You broke me, and now you want to fix it because you feel bad." Adrian felt the sting in her words. He didn't blame her, he deserved it. But seeing her standing there, drenched and fragile, something inside him refused to let go. He shrugged off his jacket and stepped closer. "Please, at least take this." "I don't want it." "Amira, go back to your world, Adrian. The one where everything is perfect. This," she pointed around at the flooded street and her worn mat, "is mine now." For a moment, silence. The rain slowed, turning into a soft drizzle. Adrian stared at her, the woman who once made him believe in kindness and laughter. He wanted to tell her he'd trade all his wealth just to undo that one mistake. But he knew words weren't enough anymore. He looked at her one last time, his voice trembling as he whispered, "I'm not leaving you here." Then, before she could stop him, he turned, opened the car door, and gestured for her to come. Amira hesitated. Every instinct screamed to stay, to protect what was left of her pride. But as a cold wind brushed against her skin and her baby kicked softly, she realized, maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about pride anymore. It was about survival. With slow, uncertain steps, she walked toward the car. And as Adrian opened the door for her, their eyes met again. 1,000 unsaid words between them, 1,000 broken pieces waiting to heal. Neither of them spoke. The city lights shimmered in the puddles like scattered stars as he helped her in. And for the first time in 2 years, Amira felt something strange. Not trust, not forgiveness, but hope. Fragile, trembling hope. And Adrian, as he sat behind the wheel, whispered to himself, "I'll make this right, no matter what it takes." Adrian drove through the storm with one hand on the steering wheel and the other gripping the edge of his seat. Every time he glanced at Amira, his chest tightened. She sat silently in the passenger seat, shivering beneath his jacket, her head resting against the window. He wanted to speak, to apologize, to explain, but the words wouldn't come. The only sound in the car was the rain drumming against the windshield and the occasional soft groan from Amira as she fought to stay awake. "Hold on, Amira," he whispered. "We're almost there." Her eyelids fluttered, but she didn't respond. By the time they reached the private clinic, Adrian's shirt was soaked from the rain and worry. The nurses recognized him instantly, their professional smiles fading when they saw the frail woman in his arms. "Prepare a room," he ordered softly. His voice was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of panic. As the doctors rushed her into the ward, he stood frozen by the door. The bright white hallway felt endless. His heart pounded with guilt and helplessness, feelings he hadn't known in years. For the first time in forever, Adrian Cole, the billionaire who controlled everything, realized he was powerless. Hours later, Amira slept peacefully on a hospital bed, her face pale but calm. Adrian sat beside her, elbows on his knees, eyes never leaving her face. The soft beeping of the monitor filled the quiet room, each sound reminding him she was still alive. He reached out, brushing a strand of wet hair from her forehead. "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice breaking, "for not believing you, for letting pride destroy us." He closed his eyes, memories flooding back. The nights they had stayed up late dreaming together. How she would draw dress designs while he worked on business plans. The promises, the laughter, the little notes she used to leave on his coffee mug saying things like, "You work too hard, but I still love you." Back then, life had been simple, before rumors, before greed, before his fear of betrayal. He remembered the fight, the one that changed everything. He had accused her of leaking company secrets to a rival firm. She had begged him to believe her, crying until her voice broke. "Adrian, I'd never hurt you. You're the only man I've ever loved." But he had turned away. "I can't take that risk," he'd said coldly. And that was the night she left, or rather, the night he let her go. Now, watching her chest rise and fall beneath hospital sheets, the truth hit him harder than any storm ever could. He had lost her because he chose pride over love. The door opened quietly. A nurse entered, adjusting the foredrip. "She's weak," the nurse said kindly, "but the baby's heartbeat is strong." Adrian's eyes widened slightly. "The baby, it's mine?" The nurse gave him a small, knowing smile. "She didn't say much, sir. But the way she looked when we mentioned your name, I'd say that baby belongs to you." After she left, Adrian sat there in silence, staring at Amira's sleeping form. The thought that she might have carried his child all this time, alone, hungry, cold, filled him with a pain deeper than any business failure. When Amira finally woke, her eyes blinked slowly in confusion before settling on him. Where am I?" "You're safe," he said gently, standing beside her. "At the hospital. You fainted." She looked around, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you helping me now?" Adrian swallowed hard. His throat felt dry. He wanted to tell her everything. The guilt, the sleepless nights, the regret that followed him everywhere. But all that came out was, "Because I never stopped loving you." Amira's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Love?" she said bitterly. "Love doesn't look like what you did to me." He winced. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life proving that I still mean it." She looked away, but her fingers brushed gently over her stomach. The baby kicked faintly, and Adrian saw it. That small, fragile spark of emotion she tried to hide. He reached for her hand but stopped halfway. "Just let me be here," he said quietly. "You don't have to forgive me, but let me make sure you and the baby are okay." Amira hesitated. Her heart was torn. Part of her wanted to hate him forever, but another part remembered the man who used to hold her close and whisper that forever was too short with her. Finally, she sighed, voice trembling. "You can stay, but this doesn't erase the past." Adrian nodded, eyes wet. "I don't want to erase it," he said. "I want to fix it." And as the rain outside faded into a soft drizzle, Amira closed her eyes again. For the first time in months, she slept without fear, while the man who once broke her heart silently vowed to become her shelter again. Days passed slowly in the quiet warmth of the clinic. Amira's color began to return, and her strength crept back little by little. Yet, even as her body healed, the air between her and Adrian remained heavy, thick with words they hadn't said and memories neither of them could forget. Adrian visited every morning, sometimes bringing breakfast, sometimes just sitting quietly by her bedside, pretending to read business emails he wasn't really seeing. Every time she moved or sighed, his eyes lifted, waiting for her to speak. But Amira kept her distance. It was on a calm morning, the kind where the rain had finally stopped and sunlight peeked shyly through the blinds, that she finally turned to him. Her voice was soft but firm, the way a wounded heart sounds when it's done pretending to be strong. "I told you I didn't cheat," she said, staring at the wall. "But your mother, your lawyers, your board members, they all made me look guilty. They made me look like a liar." Adrian froze, guilt clawing through his chest. He remembered the scene vividly, how the accusations had come so suddenly, how the evidence had seemed so convincing, and how easily he'd believed them. He clenched his fists, his voice low. "I remember," he whispered. "My mother said, 'A woman like that will ruin your name, Adrian. She's only after your money.' And I listened." Amira's lips trembled. "You didn't just listen," she said, turning toward him. "You threw me out of your life. You threw me out like I was nothing." The words hit him like stones. He had no defense, no excuse strong enough to wash away the truth. He took a slow breath, eyes glistening. "I was a coward," he admitted. "I let them destroy the only thing real in my life. I thought I was protecting myself, but all I did was lose everything that ever mattered." Silence fell again. Only the soft beeping of the heart monitor filled the room. Amira looked down at her hands, fingers tracing the faint marks left by hospital needles. "It doesn't matter anymore," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper, "because I'm carrying someone else's child." Adrian felt something inside him snap. His heart stopped for a second, the air thick and heavy in his lungs. He looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the sadness in her eyes, the pain she was trying to hide. He opened his mouth to speak, but no sound came. His mind raced with questions. Who was the father? Did he hurt her? Did she love him? But before any of those thoughts could form into words, Amira sighed and looked away. "You don't need to feel responsible," she said softly. "You don't owe me anything anymore. I've already accepted my life for what it is." Adrian stood up, running a hand through his hair, his chest rising and falling unevenly. "How can you say that?" he said, his voice rough. "You were living under a bridge, Amira. Alone. Hungry. I can't just—" "You already did," she interrupted, her tone steady but full of hurt. "You walked away once, Adrian. You believed lies over love. That's what broke me. Not the hunger, not the streets, you did." Tears burned in his eyes, and he didn't bother hiding them. He had been taught that real men don't cry, but at that moment he didn't care. He would have given everything, every company, every mansion, every car, just to go back to the night he let her walk away. He moved closer to her bedside, his voice trembling. "Maybe I don't deserve forgiveness, but please, don't push me away now. I can't leave you like this." Amira stared at him for a long time, searching his face for the truth, the same way she used to when she still believed in them. Her eyes softened just slightly, but her words stayed guarded. "You don't even know who I've become," she whispered, "or what this baby means to me." Adrian looked at her stomach, then back at her. "Maybe not," he said quietly, "but I want to." Something in his tone made her look away, her lips trembling as she fought back tears. She wanted to hate him, to send him out the door and erase every memory of what they'd shared. But the heart doesn't always listen to logic. Finally, she said softly, "Some things burn so deeply, Adrian, they can't be rebuilt." He nodded slowly, his voice breaking. "Then let me start by learning to heal the ashes." The words lingered between them, fragile, uncertain, but real. And though Amira didn't answer, she didn't ask him to leave either. For the first time in years, Adrian felt a flicker of hope, the kind that hurts and heals at the same time. because even if their past had burned everything to the ground, he was ready to spend the rest of his life trying to rebuild what was lost. After Amira was discharged from the clinic, Adrian insisted on finding her a safe place to stay. The hospitals made her nervous. Too bright, too cold, too full of memories she wasn't ready to face. So, against her protests, he took her to a quiet motel at the edge of town. It wasn't one of his luxury hotels. It was simple and small, but warm and peaceful. "You can rest here until you decide what you want to do next," he told her gently. Amira didn't argue. She was too tired to fight him anymore. Every movement felt heavier as the days passed. Her pregnancy was almost at full term, but her body had grown weaker from all she'd endured on the streets. Adrian stayed nearby, checking in every day with food and baby supplies. He'd never done anything like that before. Shopping for diapers, baby clothes, tiny socks, but something about preparing for this baby made him feel alive again. Then, one rainy night, it happened. Amira's scream tore through the quiet room like thunder. She clutched her stomach, sweat breaking out on her forehead. Pain racked through her body, and she could barely breathe. Adrian, who had been dozing off in a chair nearby, jumped to his feet. "Amira, what's wrong?" Her face twisted in agony. "The baby, it's coming," she gasped. Without thinking, Adrian grabbed his car keys, threw on his jacket, and helped her into the car. The rain outside was fierce again, as if the heavens themselves were reliving the night they had first crossed paths under the bridge. "Breathe, Amira," Adrian said as he drove through the storm. His voice shook, but his grip on her hand was firm. "Please stay with me. Just breathe." Amira cried out again, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "I can't. It hurts so much." "You can," Adrian whispered, his eyes glistening. "You're the strongest woman I've ever known." Every red light felt like forever. Every minute felt like a battle against fate. He honked, swerved, shouted for the gates to open faster when they reached the hospital. Nurses rushed out with a stretcher, their voices blending into chaos. He tried to follow her inside, but a nurse stopped him at the door. "Sir, you have to wait here." Adrian's heart pounded. He paced the hallway, drenched in rain and fear. He couldn't sit still. For the first time in years, money couldn't buy him peace. He stared at the door and prayed silently. For her, for the baby, for forgiveness. Then, after what felt like eternity, he heard it. A cry. A small, beautiful, powerful cry that cut through the night and filled the hallway with life. Adrian froze, his throat tightening as tears welled up. The nurse smiled softly as she stepped out, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in pink. "Congratulations," she said. "It's a girl." He reached out slowly, his hands trembling as he touched the baby's soft cheek. "She's perfect," he whispered, his voice breaking. "She's perfect, just like her mother." Inside the room, Amira lay weak but smiling. Her face glowed faintly under the soft hospital lights. When she saw him holding the baby, her eyes filled with tears. Not of pain this time, but of peace. "What will you name her?" Adrian asked, still in awe. Amira looked at her daughter, then at him. "Hope," she said softly, "because she's the only thing that kept me going." Adrian swallowed hard, nodding. "Hope," he repeated, as if the name itself carried a miracle. He handed the baby back to her and sat beside the bed, unable to stop staring. He wasn't looking at the girl who once broke his pride. He was looking at the woman who had survived heartbreak, homelessness, and despair, and still found the strength to bring life into the world. For the first time in years, Amira saw something different in him too. Not the billionaire everyone feared or envied, but the man who used to walk with her under the stars, talk about dreams, and promise forever. He reached out and held her hand gently. "Thank you for bringing her into this world." Amira smiled faintly. "You should thank her," she whispered. "She gave you a second chance." Adrian looked at the tiny baby resting peacefully in her mother's arms, and for the first time since his empire began, he felt truly small. Small, but full of something he hadn't felt in years. Love. Real, raw, healing love. As rain continued to fall outside, he realized something profound. Hope wasn't just the baby's name. It was the gift life had returned to him, wrapped in innocence and forgiveness. And in that quiet hospital room, 3 broken hearts began to beat in harmony again. One for pain, one for healing, and one for the beautiful miracle of second chances. A few weeks after Hope's birth, the hospital finally discharged Amira. She was stronger now, but still fragile, like glass that had once shattered and been carefully pieced back together. Adrian insisted she shouldn't return to the streets. "You and the baby deserve better," he said gently. So he found her a small, cozy apartment on the quieter side of Lagos. Nothing fancy, just peaceful. It had a soft beige couch, baby blue curtains, and a cradle that he personally picked out. When Amira stepped in for the first time, she froze. "You did all this?" she whispered, her eyes wide. Adrian smiled awkwardly, scratching his neck. "It's not much, but it's safe." Safe. The word hit her heart. She hadn't felt safe in a long time. The following days were simple but filled with meaning. Every morning, Adrian would show up with groceries, baby formula, and small gifts for Hope. Tiny dresses, rattles, soft toys shaped like stars. He cooked sometimes, though he wasn't very good at it. Once, he almost set the kitchen towel on fire trying to make pap. Amira laughed for the first time in months that day. A real, deep laugh that startled even her. "You still can't cook to save your life," she teased. Adrian grinned sheepishly. "At least I'm trying now." There was no pretending between them anymore. The walls of pride that had once stood so tall were slowly crumbling. It wasn't easy. Their hearts still carried scars. But little by little, the silence between them began to feel less like distance and more like peace. Every evening, Adrian came by to help with the baby. Hope loved him. She'd smile every time she heard his voice, kicking her tiny feet excitedly. Adrian would lift her up carefully, his large hands trembling the first few times, afraid he might drop her. "You've got to support her head," Amira would say, guiding his hands. "I'm learning," he replied, smiling. "She's teaching me." And she was. Hope was teaching him patience, humility, love, the kind that didn't demand anything in return. Sometimes, Amira would watch him from across the room as he rocked the baby gently, whispering lullabies he remembered from childhood. In those moments, she saw a different man. Not the proud billionaire who once broke her heart, but a man who was learning to love softly again. One quiet afternoon, while Hope slept in her cradle, Amira finally asked the question that had been haunting her. "Why are you doing all this, Adrian?" He paused, looking at her with eyes full of sincerity. "Because I failed you once," he said slowly, "and I'll live with that forever. But I won't fail her too." His words were simple, but they carried more weight than any apology ever could. Amira blinked back tears. She wanted to stay angry, to remind him of everything he'd done wrong. But her heart, tired and aching, wouldn't let her. The truth was she still cared. Even after all the pain, even after all the nights she cried under that bridge, some part of her heart still beat for him. A few days later, Amira woke up to the smell of something burning. Again. She rushed to the kitchen to find Adrian waving a towel at a smoking frying pan. "Adrian," she gasped. He coughed and turned, embarrassed. "I was just trying to make breakfast before you woke up." She burst into laughter, the kind that filled the room with warmth. For a moment, they weren't ex-lovers or broken souls. Just two people learning how to exist again, one clumsy moment at a time. Later that night, as Hope slept peacefully between them, Adrian sat by the window, staring at the city lights. "Do you ever think about what could have been?" he asked softly. Amira sighed, her gaze following his. "Every day," she admitted. "But maybe things happen this way for a reason. Maybe we both needed to break before we could understand what love really means." Adrian turned to her, his voice low. "And what does it mean?" She smiled faintly. "Love isn't perfect, Adrian. It's messy. It forgives even when it shouldn't. Tries even when it hurts." He nodded slowly, her words sinking deep. The tension that had once filled every room they shared was gone now. replaced by something fragile, something like forgiveness. As the night grew quiet, hope stirred in her sleep, and Amira leaned over to tuck her in. Adrian watched them, the woman he once lost and the baby who gave him a second chance. And in that moment, he realized something he'd never understood before. The walls between them hadn't just begun to fall. They were crumbling completely, brick by brick, replaced by something new, something real. It was a peaceful evening, or at least it was supposed to be. The sun was dipping behind the rooftops, painting the city in shades of gold and orange. Amira was sitting on the couch, gently rocking baby Hope in her arms while humming softly. Adrian had just returned from work, looking tired but calm. For once, life felt steady. Then the doorbell rang, loud and impatient. Adrian frowned. Who could that be? Before Amira could answer, the door swung open, and there she was, Mrs. Cole, Adrian's mother, standing in the doorway like a storm in pearls. Her perfectly styled hair, diamond necklace, and cold stare reminded Amira instantly why she'd lost everything 2 years ago. "How dare you bring that woman back into our lives?" she spat, her voice sharp and echoing through the apartment. Amira froze, clutching Hope closer to her chest. Her heart began to pound, but she said nothing. "Mother," Adrian said calmly, stepping between them, "you shouldn't be here." Mrs. Cole's eyes flashed with fury. "I warned you about her before, and now you've brought her back? After everything she did to you? Do you want to ruin the family name?" Adrian's jaw tightened. For years, he'd let his mother's words control him, make him doubt himself, and Amira. But not this time. He turned to face her fully, his voice firm and low. "She didn't ruin my life, Mother. You did." The room fell silent. Even baby Hope stopped moving, as if sensing the tension. Mrs. Cole's face twisted in disbelief. "Excuse me?" Adrian stepped closer. "You lied," he said. "You paid the driver to frame her. You created the rumors that destroyed her name, and mine." Mrs. Cole blinked rapidly, her confidence faltering. "That's ridiculous. Why would I? Because she wasn't rich enough?" Adrian cut in, his voice trembling with anger. "Because you couldn't stand the idea of your son marrying someone from the streets. You called her a distraction, a burden, and you used your power to make her disappear." Amira's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Adrian, what are you saying?" He turned to her, his expression softening. "I found everything, Amira. The deleted messages, the driver's confession, even the payment records my mother tried to hide. She made you look guilty, and I believed her." Mrs. Cole gasped. "You can't prove." "I already did," Adrian said, pulling a small folder from his jacket. He dropped it on the table. "Every piece of evidence is here. The truth you tried to bury." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the soft hum of the air conditioner. Mrs. Cole's face paled. She looked at her son, then at the woman holding his child, and for the first time her voice faltered. I was trying to protect you," she whispered weakly. Adrian shook his head. "No. You were protecting your pride. And you cost me the woman I loved." Amira's tears finally broke free. But they weren't tears of anger this time. They were tears of release, of finally being believed. She looked down at baby Hope, her voice trembling. "So all this pain was for nothing?" Adrian stepped closer, gently taking her hands in his. His voice was soft, full of regret and truth. "Not for nothing," he whispered. "It taught me what love truly costs. It taught me who I am without it." Amira looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she saw no pride, no fear, no doubt. Just honesty. Mrs. Cole stood frozen by the door, guilt flickering across her face. Her eyes softened as she looked at the baby in Amira's arms. Hope stirred, letting out a tiny yawn, and something shifted in the older woman's expression. For a moment, she didn't see a scandal. She saw her granddaughter. Adrian turned to his mother, his tone gentler now. "You don't have to accept Amira for me, but at least accept her for her." He nodded toward Hope. "She's part of this family too." Mrs. Cole swallowed hard, emotion breaking through her polished exterior. She looked at Amira and whispered, "I was wrong." Amira blinked in surprise, unsure how to respond. Adrian placed a hand on his mother's shoulder. "You can make it right by letting us heal." Without another word, Mrs. Cole quietly left, the door closing softly behind her. The room fell silent again, but this time, the air felt lighter. Amira turned to Adrian, her eyes still glistening. "You stood up for me," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I should have done it long ago," he replied. "But I'll never stop now." She smiled faintly, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You've changed." Adrian smiled back. "No," he said softly. "I've finally become the man you believed I could be." And as Hope giggled suddenly, the sound of her tiny laughter filled the room, like a promise that the truth, no matter how painful, had finally set them free. Weeks passed, and with every sunrise, something beautiful began to grow again. Slowly, quietly, like a flower blooming after a storm. Amira's heart was still tender, stitched together by forgiveness and time. She didn't forget the pain, the betrayal, the loneliness, the nights under the bridge, but she chose to let it go. Not because it was easy, but because she finally understood that peace was worth more than anger. Adrian, on the other hand, had changed in ways even he didn't recognize. The man who once cared about profits and prestige now found himself waking up to thoughts of purpose. Every morning, he'd check on Amira and Hope before heading to work, and every night, he'd come home just to hold his daughter and listen to Amira hum her lullabies. One afternoon, as Amira fed Hope on the couch, Adrian entered the living room holding a file. His eyes were shining with excitement. "I have something to show you." She looked up curiously. "What's that?" He smiled and handed her the document. "A dream," he said. "Ours." Inside the file were blueprints, charity registration forms, and pictures of an old building under renovation. Amira scanned the pages, her eyebrows knitting together. "The Hope Haven Foundation?" she read aloud. Adrian nodded, his voice steady but soft. "A place for single mothers and pregnant women living on the streets, like where I found you. It'll give them food, shelter, medical care, and a chance to rebuild their lives." Amira's eyes welled up. "Adrian," she whispered, speechless. He knelt beside her, resting a hand on her knee. "I don't want anyone else to go through what you went through. This isn't just about charity. It's about redemption." For a moment, she couldn't speak. She just looked at him, this man who had once broken her heart, now rebuilding the world around her piece by piece. Weeks later, the dream became real. The grand opening of the Hope Haven drew a large crowd: reporters, photographers, volunteers, and government officials. The building itself was painted white and gold, with a soft pink sign above the gate that read, "Where second chances are born." Amira stood beside Adrian at the entrance, Hope sleeping peacefully in her arms. The air was alive with chatter and camera flashes, but Amira's focus was on the women standing in line outside. Women with tired eyes, swollen bellies, and shy smiles. She saw herself in them, her old fears, her old pain, and her heart filled with compassion. When the ribbon was finally cut, the crowd erupted in applause. Adrian stepped forward to give his speech. He wore no fancy suit this time, just a simple white shirt. His voice trembled slightly as he began. "I built this," he said, "not as a billionaire or a businessman, but as a man who learned that compassion is greater than pride." He turned his head slightly toward Amira. "There was once a woman who lost everything: her home, her dignity, her trust, and yet, she still found the strength to forgive. She taught me that love isn't about power or status. It's about showing up, even when you failed before." The crowd fell silent. Some of the journalists lowered their cameras, their eyes softening. Adrian's voice grew stronger. "The Hope Haven isn't just a building. It's a promise that no woman should ever be left to suffer alone. That every life, no matter how broken, deserves a second chance." As he finished, the audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Amira's heart swelled with emotion. She had never imagined that her pain could lead to something so powerful. something that would touch so many lives. After the ceremony, Adrian found her standing in the courtyard, watching a group of children playing with balloons. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. She smiled faintly. "About how pain can bloom into purpose," she said. "About how sometimes what breaks us also builds us." Adrian slipped his hand into hers. "Then maybe we were meant to break," he murmured. Amira looked at him, eyes glistening. "Maybe," she whispered, "but now we're healing." In the distance, the sun dipped behind the newly painted building, casting a warm, golden glow over the courtyard. Mothers laughed, children ran, and for the first time in years, both Amira and Adrian felt whole again. As they stood there, a man, a woman, and their daughter named Hope, it became clear that this wasn't just about rebuilding love. It was about rebuilding hearts. Because sometimes the most broken people are the ones who end up teaching the world how to heal. The evening air was cool, touched by the scent of rain-soaked earth. The city glowed in the distance, car lights twinkling like scattered stars across Lagos. It was one of those rare, peaceful nights when the world seemed to pause just long enough for something magical to happen. Amira sat quietly in the passenger seat as Adrian drove. Hope was asleep in her stroller at the back, her tiny breaths soft and rhythmic. Amira didn't know where they were going. Adrian had only said, "It's a surprise." As the car slowed, recognition flickered in her eyes. Her heart skipped a beat when she saw it. The bridge. The same old bridge where she had once sat, drenched and hopeless, clutching her pregnant belly. The same place where Adrian had found her again and everything began to change. "Adrian," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Why here?" He smiled, stepping out of the car and walking around to open her door. "Because this is where my life started over," he said. She took his hand and stepped out. The bridge looked different now, repaired, clean, glowing under the soft city lights. Rain misted lightly from the sky, just enough to make the moment shimmer. They stood there in silence for a moment, the only sounds being the distant honk of traffic and the gentle hum of the night. Adrian turned to her, his eyes warm and steady. "Do you remember this spot?" Amira nodded slowly. "How could I forget? I thought my life was over that night." He took a deep breath. "And I thought my heart was empty. But you changed everything, Amira. You taught me that love isn't about perfection or control. It's about forgiveness, about holding on when everything else tells you to let go." Amira felt her eyes sting with tears. The wind brushed her face, carrying with it the same rain that once witnessed her pain. Only now, it felt like blessing instead of punishment. Adrian reached into his coat pocket and dropped to one knee. The faint drizzle caught the streetlights, and the world seemed to blur except for the two of them. "Amira," he said, voice trembling, "I lost you once because I didn't believe in love, because I let fear and pride guide me instead of my heart. But not again. Please, let me make it right. Let me build a life with you and hope. A real one." Amira's hands flew to her mouth, her tears spilling freely. Hope stirred in her stroller and let out a tiny giggle, as if cheering for the moment. Adrian smiled through his own tears and opened a small velvet box. Inside was a simple, elegant ring, a delicate gold band with a tiny diamond that sparkled like forgiveness under the lights. "Marry me, Amira," he whispered, "not because of the past, but because of the future I want with you." Amira's heart pounded. Memories flooded her mind. The betrayal, the pain, the loneliness, but also the healing, the laughter, the way he held Hope as if she were his whole world. She knelt beside him, tears shining on her cheeks. "Adrian," she whispered, her voice breaking, "you already made it right." He looked at her in disbelief. "So, is that a yes?" She smiled through her tears. "Yes," she breathed. "1,000 times yes." Adrian slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around him. The rain fell harder now, but neither of them cared. They stood under the bridge, the same place where pain had once lived, now reborn as a place of promise. Hope giggled again, her tiny hands reaching out from the stroller as if to bless their embrace. Adrian pulled back slightly and kissed Amira's forehead. I love you, he whispered. Amira smiled, leaning into him. I know, she said softly. And I love you too. The man you are now, the man who learned to love beyond pride. As they stood there, the lights of Lagos flickered behind them and the rain washed over the bridge like a baptism, cleansing the past, sealing their new beginning. What was once a place of heartbreak had become a home for love reborn. Months passed, and the story of Amira and Adrian spread across the city like a song everyone wanted to hear. From boardrooms to markets, people whispered about the billionaire who found his pregnant ex on the streets. A tale of love, forgiveness, and second chances. But for Adrian and Amira, it wasn't about fame. It was about healing. It was about finally stepping into the light after walking through years of darkness. Their wedding day came on a bright afternoon, the sky painted with soft clouds and the scent of blooming roses. The ceremony was held in a beautiful garden, surrounded by white tents and golden chairs. The same journalists who once wrote rumors about their breakup were now invited to witness their new beginning. Amira stood behind the curtain, her heart thumping fast. Her wedding dress was simple yet breathtaking, white lace with soft sleeves, flowing like a dream. Her veil shimmered gently in the sunlight. As she looked at her reflection, she couldn't help but think of how far she had come. From a homeless, heartbroken woman under a bridge to a bride about to marry the man she once thought she had lost forever. Hope, now a bright little girl with curious eyes, stood beside her holding a small basket of flower petals. "Mummy, you look like a princess," she said in her tiny voice. Amira smiled and bent down to kiss her daughter's forehead. "And you, my love, are my angel." The music began, soft piano keys and the gentle strum of violins. The guests stood as Amira took her first step down the aisle. Hope walked ahead of her, scattering petals and giggling as they fluttered through the air. When Adrian saw them, his breath caught. He stood at the altar, his black suit crisp, his eyes glistening with tears he didn't bother to hide. The billionaire who once hid behind pride was now a man unashamed of emotion. And when Amira reached him, his tears fell freely. He took her hands in his voice trembling as he spoke his vows. "I once found gold in wealth," he said softly, his eyes locked on hers. "But true treasure was the woman I left under a bridge. You taught me that love isn't found in power or perfection, but in forgiveness. In the way two broken hearts can still find a way to beat together." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd. Even his mother, sitting in the front row, dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, smiling proudly at the woman she once misunderstood. Amira's hands shook slightly as she spoke her vows in return. "Adrian," she whispered, tears slipping down her cheeks, "you didn't just find me, you found yourself again. And in doing so, you gave me back my faith, in love, in life, and in us." The priest smiled warmly. "You may now kiss your bride." Adrian leaned forward, and their lips met, gentle, full of promise, full of peace. The crowd erupted in applause as Hope clapped her little hands, laughing with pure joy. After the ceremony, the sky that had once poured tears over their broken past began to drizzle again. But this time, the rain felt like a blessing. Guests ran under tents, laughing, but Adrian and Amira stayed where they were, letting the drops fall on them. "It's raining again," Amira said with a soft chuckle. Adrian smiled, wiping a raindrop from her cheek. "Maybe it's heaven's way of saying our story's complete." She leaned into his chest, her voice calm and full of gratitude. "No," she said, "it's heaven's way of saying it's just beginning." The rain fell gently, washing away every shadow of their past. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the loneliness, and watering the roots of a love reborn. And there, beneath the soft gray sky, Adrian Cole, the billionaire who had once been lost in his own success, finally found what he had been searching for all along. Not power, not riches, but peace. Because true love, like the rain, always finds its way back. Not to the place it started, but to the heart that never stopped believing.